Bhavishya Purana. Vedavyasa had a disciple named Shatanika. The sage came to Shatanika and said, "We are desirous of learning about righteous form of conduct. You are the disciple of the great Vedavyasa and have learnt many words of wisdom from him. Please recite for us this sacred knowledge." "It is indeed true that I have learnt much from Vedavyasa," replied Shatanika, "but that which you wish to learn still eludes me. Let me ask the great sage as to what I should recite for you." Shatanika accordingly went to Vedavyasa. "I have already taught all this to my disciple Sumantu," Vedavyasa told Shatanika. "Why don't you simply go to Sumantu? He will be able to tell you all that you wish to learn." Vedavyasa had 6 chief disciples, named Samantu, Jaimini, Paila, Vaishvapayana, Shukadeva, and Maharshana. When Shatanika went to Sumantu, a long interlocution started between the two. It is this which forms the substance of the Bhavishya Purana. "Brahma," said Sumantu, "creates, preserves, and destroys the universe. There is no god like Brahma, no teacher like him. The sacred Vedas are his conception. He is the god of wisdom. His consort Saraswati is a goddess of wisdom." As a Rajasika Purana, the Bhavishya Purana extol Brahma to great heights. There are 3 primary qualities: Sattva, Tamas, and are 2 of them. Rajas is a quality in between Sattva and Tamas, and implies the animation of passion and enjoyment of sensual delights. In it, the operation of the affection and passion is the strongest, and occasional predominance is given to both good and evil. These qualities are identified with Brahma and the act of creation. It is in sense that the Bhavishya Purana is a Brahma Rajasika Purana. The lineage should devote themselves to Brahma. Those and only those vested in the Vedas should install his image and build temples to him. A person who constructs a temple to Brahma goes straight to heaven and enjoys divine pleasures. If a person sweeps one of Brahma's temple, he attains the object of his desire. This is also the case even if the sweeping is done with evil intention. Prior to the creation of the universe, there was darkness and water everywhere. In this primordial darkness, Brahma created himself through his own energy. Since he was born from himself, Swayam, Brahma came to be known as Swayambhu. It was Brahma who created all the beings that populate the universe. From his mental powers he created the great sages, Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Vasishka, Phrigu, Daksha, and Narada. Accounts in the other Puranas often mentions that Brahma was born from a lotus that sprouted out of Vishnu's navel. In the other accounts, Brahma's birth is attributed to an universal egg, Anda. None of these accounts is mentioned in the Bhavishya Purana. In the ancient times, success automatically crowned human efforts. There was no need of any divine favor. People could do what they wanted to do without encountering any difficulties. Or even if difficulties were met with, they could easily be overcome. People thus developed an overblown sense of self-importance. They became proud, overconfident, and irreverent. "I must do something about this," thought Brahma. "I must tone down the arrogant humans. I will create a god named Ganesha. Humans will have to worship him if they desire success in their efforts. Brahma created Ganesha. No longer were ordinary men and women able to resolve their difficulties on their own. They now needed Ganesha's help. They needed to keep this god pleased and propitiated. Before embarking on any task, people would first have to seek Ganesha's favor. He would be the first god to be invoked and the undertaking of any new venture. Ganesha is accordingly called the remover of obstacle and the giver of success. Ganesha gives extraordinary powers to those who are his devotees. To please Ganesha, one has to purify oneself through baths and offer the god food and flowers. Donation in cash and in kind to Brahmins are also recommended. Ganesha is, however, displeased if a person dreams of bathing in oil or is sad without reason. He is also displeased when rulers do not rule, teachers do not teach, or students do not study. Agriculture and trade do not prosper when Ganesha is displeased. The Puranas invariably state that Ganesha was the son of Shiva and his consort Parvati. The Bhavishya Purana is unique in that it attributes Ganesha's creations to Brahma himself. The most important god in the Bhavishya Purana is the sun god Surya. To ensure that creation could proceed, Brahma divided his body in two. The male half came to known as Swayambhuva Manu, and the female half came to be known as Shatarupa. Through his mental powers, Manu gave birth to 10 sons. Since these sons became lords, that was the reason in the universe they came to be known as Prajapatis. One of these was Daksha. Daksha had a daughter named Aditi. The sage Kashyapa was Brahma's son and Aditi was married to Kashyapa. An egg was the product of this union. For days nothing happened to the egg and it was thought that the egg had died. But Kashyapa noticed that this was not quite the case and remarked, "The egg is not dead." When the sun god emerged from the egg, he came to be known as Martanda, from the words Mrita and Anda that his father Kashyapa had used. Martanda was also known as Surya. Vishwakarma was the architect of the gods and had a daughter named Samjna. Samjna was married to Surya. The children were Yama and Yamuna. Elsewhere, the Bhavishya Purana mentions that Surya and Samjna had another son named Manu. This was Savarni Manu and is not to be confused with Swayambhuva Manu. But Surya was so radiant that Samjna could not stand her husband's energy. She therefore created a woman named Chaya, shadow, or Nikshubha, out of her own body. Chaya looked exactly like Samjna, and it was impossible to tell the two apart. "I cannot be my husband, brilliant," Samjna could tell Chaya. "Please stay here and pretend to be me. Take care of my children and under no circumstance divulge the truth." "I will do as you wish," replied Chaya. "I will not come out with the truth as long as I am not cursed. But the moment I am cursed, I will be forced to reveal that I am not Samjna." Samjna agreed to this condition and left. For a while she went and stayed with her father Vishwakarma. But she did not tell her father that she had deserted her husband. Initially, Vishwakarma thought that Samjna had come to pay him a visit. But days passed and Samjna showed no intention of returning to her husband. Her father's suspicions were aroused, and to allay these suspicions, Samjna left her father's house. She adopted the form of a mare and began to live in the kingdom known as Uttarakuru. The Matsya Purana states that Samjna lived in a kingdom known as Maru, desert, and not Uttarakuru. Unaware of what had happened, Surya treated Chaya as Samjna. That is, he took the shadow to be the reality. Chaya bore Surya's three children named Shruta Shrava, Shruta and Tapati. Shruta Shrava came to be known as Savarni Manu, and Shruta became the planet Graha Shani, Saturn. To continue with the story, Chaya's treatment of Samjna children was stepmotherly. She was special towards her own children. One day, Tapati and Yamuna had a quarrel. "I curse you that you will become a river," said Tapati. "And I curse you that you too will become a river," retorted Yamuna. The Markandeya Purana has a different story to tell. Samjna could not stand the sun's god brilliance and closed her eyes. This angered Surya, and he cursed Samjna that her son Yama would be the god of death. Thus cursed, Samjna no longer closed her eyes but kept blinking. As this, Surya cursed Samjna that her daughter Yamuna would become a river. When Tapati turned into a river, Chaya was angered and vented her rage on the innocent Yama, because he happened to be Yamuna's brother. Yama had already been resentful of Chaya and the way that she had been treated him and his sister. He now raised his foot to kick his stepmother. "Chaya cursed me, Yama. As soon as you put that foot down, insect will devour it. She said it will wither." Surya now happened to arrive on the scene, and Yama complained to his father that Chaya was always unfair towards him. "I may have committed a sin in attempting to kick my mother," said Yama. "But does a mother ever curse her own children? I fear that this is not our mother at all. And please do something about insect devouring my feet." "I fear that I cannot entirely negate the curse," replied Surya. "Let the insect suck the blood from your feet and devour the flesh. That will allow your mother's curse to take effect. But I bless you that nothing will actually happen to your feet despite what the insect do. I will not wither. As for my daughters Tapati and Yamuna, who have become rivers, I bless them that they will be sacred and wash away the sins of all living beings. Yamuna will be as sacred as the holy Ganga, and Tapati as sacred as the holy Narmada." Surya next taxed Chaya with the trust. A mother should not discriminate amongst her children. Since she had done so, Surya threatened to curse her. But as soon as he proceeded to do this, Chaya's condition for keeping quiet was violated, and she blurted out the truth. She told Surya that she was not Samjna but Chaya. Samjna had left. Surya went to his father-in-law Vishwakarma to look for Samjna. Through his mental powers, Vishwakarma found out what had happened. He told Surya that Samjna had left him because she could not stand his radiance. "Let me refashion your body," offered Vishwakarma. "Let me turn you around on a lathe so that I can slice off some of this excess energy. You will then be acceptable to Samjna." Surya agreed to submit to this order. His body was anointed with red sandalwood paste and flowers and mounted on the lathe. The excess energy was sliced off by Vishwakarma, and Surya became exceedingly handsome. This entire exercise was undertaken in the land of Shakadvipa. Vishwakarma also told Surya that his wife was in the land of Uttarakuru in form of a mare. Surya adopted the form of a horse and joined Samjna there. As horse, Ashva, Surya and Samjna had two sons named in Ashwini Kumaras. The sons were born from the mare's nostril. The twins were split image of one another and extremely handsome. They become the physician of the god. After Surya and Samujna returned to their normal forms, they had another son named Revanta or Raivanta. The son was born astride a horse, and he was armed and armored when he was born. Revanta became the king of the Guhyakas. In some parts of the Bhavishya Purana, Surya is extolled as the supreme god, and Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva are delegated to subordinate forms derived from the sun god. Brahma himself tells the sage Yajnavalkya, Surya is the god who dispels the darkness of the whole world and lights up the three worlds. He is the light of everything. He is eternal, indestructible, and omnipresent. He is the founder, preserver, and destroyer of the universe. He is the god of all gods, the supreme one, whom no other god can equal. Surya promises salvation to those who give him their concentrated adulation. In the sun god's own words, bow to me, be my devotee, fill your minds with my thoughts. Men who worship me merge with me at the end. The Bhavishya Purana describes the three classes of followers or worshippers of Surya. These are the sun-worshipping Magas, the fire-worshipping Magas, and the sun-worshipping Bhojakas. Who were the Magas? The Bhavishya Purana states that the letter Ma is a symbol of the sun god. One who meditates on Ma is called a Maga. A Maga is then a sun worshipper. Surya is the supreme god of the Magas. They cook their meals for the sake of the sun and eat only after praying to the sun. They hail from Shakadvipa, which is located beyond Jambudvipa, on the other side of the great ocean, Lavana Samudra. Shakadvipa is surrounded on all sides by another great ocean, Sharoda Samudra. Krishna married Jambavati, and Krishna and Jambavati had a son named Shamba. As a result of curse imposed on him by his father, Shamba contracted leprosy. Shamba was told that his leprosy would be cured if he worshipped the sun. He constructed a temple to the sun on the banks of the river Chandrabhaja. The priests of Shakadvipa were well versed in the worship of Surya, and Shamba invited them to come and act as priests at the temple that he had built. The saints of Shakadvipa took their meals in silence. Ordinary people from Shakadvipa were also silent at mealtimes. Maga Brahmans wore a sacred thread known as the Avayanga around their waist. They grew beads. They did not touch carcass and other unclean objects. The Bhavishya Purana asks Maga Brahmans to keep their mouths covered as a protection against uncleanliness. They should multiply in number and donate their earnings. They should eat fruits and vegetables as part of their diet. They must be fair and firm, balanced and controlled. The account of the birth of Maga Brahmanas is as follows. There was a sage named Rujihva who was a devotee of the fire god Agni. Rujihva's daughter was Nikshubha. Surya secretly married Nikshubha, and they had a son named Jarashabda. When Rujihva found out that Nikshubha had married Surya without his knowledge, he was greatly angered. Also he did love his daughter. He cursed her. "I curse you that your son will be unworthy," he said. In tears, Nikshubha began to pray to Surya, and the sun god appeared before her. "I cannot undo your father's curse," said Surya. "He is after all a sage. But I bless you that your son's descendant will study the Vedas and wear the sacred thread known as the Avyanga. No matter what happens to your son, his descendant will be worthy. This descendant of Jarashabda were the Maga Brahmans. The Bhavishya Purana also makes reference to Magas who worshipped the fire god Agni as a daily ritual. What of the Bhajakas also mentioned as sun worshippers in the Bhavishya Purana? Like the Magas, they too hailed from Shakadvipa. But there were differences between the Magas and the Bhajakas. The Bhajakas made daily offering of food, bhojana, to Surya. They also offered incense, garlands, and other gifts. Bhajakas must study the Vedas, bathe thrice a day, pray to the sun god 5 times a day, and refuse food from a Shudra. Bhajakas should wear the sacred thread Avyanga at all times. It is on wearing the Avyanga that a Bhajaka attains purity and receives the sun god's blessing. A Bhajaka who does not wear it becomes impure and is no longer entitled to worship Surya. If he gives up the sacred thread, he loses good health, does not have progeny, and has no prospect of attaining heaven. The Bhavishya Purana states that the Avyanga incorporates all the sacred texts, all the gods, all beings, and all the worlds. Vishnu is always present at its base, Brahma at its middle, and Shiva at its upper end. From the text it seems that the Bhajakas had come to attain a higher status than the Magas. The devotion of Bhajakas is praised sky high. As a wife serves her husband, a pupil his preceptor, so the Bhajakas serve Surya. Just as there is no sacred text to acquire the Vedas, no river to acquire the holy Ganga, no ceremony to acquire the Ashwamedha Yajna, no pleasure to acquire the birth of a son, and no god to acquire the sun god, there is none to acquire the Bhajakas before Surya. The deeds of the Bhajakas should be treated as being performed by the great Surya himself. The Bhajakas came to be regarded as the holy Brahmans. No one could attain salvation without first becoming a Bhajaka. As an account is also given of the birth of the Bhajakas. Prince Priyavrata was the son of Swayambhuva Manu, and Priyavrata built a temple to the sun in Shakadvipa. He instated a golden idol of Surya in the temple, but try as he might, Priyavrata could find no one suitable enough to perform the religious rites at the temple. In sheer desperation, he began to pray to Surya. Surya was pleased at the prayers and appeared before Priyavrata. "What boon do you desire?" asked Surya. "Please grant me the boon that there may be priests at the temple," requested Priyavrata. The sun god agreed. He created 8 men out of his own body. 2 were born from the forehead, 2 from the arms, 2 from the legs, and 2 from the rays of the sun. These were the Bhajakas, and they were put in charge of the temple at Shakadvipa. A temple to Surya was also built at Kavapriya, on the southern banks of the river Yamuna. I hope you have not forgotten Yama, the god of death. Yama's visage is dreadful. He inspires fear with his long beard and terrible moustache. His lips tremble with anger, and he wears a garland of red flowers. In Yama's court are also to be found his messengers and servants, Yamaduta. They are armed with diverse weapons. Yama's chief of staff or Chitragupta. He maintains an account of human sins and store of merit, punya. Sins have to be paid for in hell, and meritorious deeds obtain their reward in heaven. The S is place of action. The fruits of this action are not reaped on S itself, but in hell or heaven, as the case may be. Only the meritorious go to heaven and are rewarded there, with an abundance of health, beauty, progeny, and entertainment. Before going to hell, sinners are taken to Yama's abode. The route is strewn with his thorns, needles, and stones, and it infested with the poisonous snakes, venomous insect, and ferocious beasts. Sinners can find no shade to shelter them from the heat of the sun, nor is there any water to slake their thirst. Yama's messengers drag the sinners along this route, paying scant attention to their pleas for mercy. Sinners are scalded and beaten by Yama's messengers. Vultures swoop down on them. Weapons lacerate them. When the sinners reach Yama's abode and are present before him, the god of death assigns them to various hells depending on the nature of the sin committed by them. They are subjected to all sorts of terrible tortures in these hells. Some are boiled in oil, others are forced to embrace red-hot iron pillars. Still others are hurled into pits containing pus and urine. Some sinners are pierced with arrows, or their bodies are chopped into pieces with swords. Food and water are denied to them. Sometimes the sinners are made to roll on hot sand, and other times they are thrown down from the peaks of mountains. Darkness, filth, and stench make up the environment in which the sinners find themselves. There are different types of punishment for different types of sin. The part of the anatomy which may have performed the sinful act is subjected to torture. It may be cut off, boiled in oil, or simply fed to insects. The Yamadutas do not tire of the task of torture, but relish it. Cries of help on the part of the sinners merely goad these tortures into redoubling their efforts. The Bhavishya Purana now has a section on the building of temples and icons. The act of building a temple is wonderful in that it combines the punya obtained from performing a sacrifice with the punya obtained from constructing public works like wells. Those who erect temples attain heaven after their death. Gods prefer to stay in beautiful surroundings amidst lakes, wells, flowers, and trees, and in place where the melodious notes of swan can be heard. Temples dedicated to gods should also therefore be aesthetically pleasing. They have to be constructed with care. All types of land are not suitable for building temples. Land where objects like hair, bones, coal, lime, husk, and the like are found should be rejected as sites for temples. Ground that accepts all kinds of seeds and moreover makes the sound of a cloud or drum when struck is acceptable. Different types of land are appropriate for the construction of temples by members of different classes, Varna. The Brahmanas constitute the first of the four classes, and white as is suitable for them. The second, third, the fourth classes are respectively Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Kshatriyas should build temples on red S, Vaishyas on yellow S, and Shudras on black S. The quality of the ground needs to be tested before a temple is built. To test this, a pit should be dug in the S. The pit should then be refilled with the S that has been dug out. If the pit is filled and there is some extra S that is left over, the land is of superior quality, and a temple can be built on that land. If the pit is just filled and there is no extra S that is left over, the land is of medium quality. A temple could be built on that land, also such a construction is not recommended. If the excavated earth cannot fill the pit, the land is of inferior quality and a temple should never be built on that land. Particular care must be taken in building a temple dedicated to Surya. The gate should always face the east. If this is not possible, the gate should face the west. There should be a base to the south of the main temple, and a place for worshipping the fire to the north. Temples dedicated to Shiva, Brahma and Vishnu should respectively be erected to the north, the east and the west of Surya's temple. Shrines to minor divinities can be built all around. All of these constitute the temple complex, which should also include a seat reserved for a reciter of the Puranas. Offerings arhya are to be made from two kupas, mandapa. The one on the right is designated for offerings made at sunrise, and the one of the left is designated for offering made at sunset. According to Vishwakarma, the architect of the gods, there are 3,000 different kinds of structures that can be used for building temples. Also, all this would be too much to enumerate. The major ones are as follows: Meru, multi-storied with several pits; Mandara, multi-storied with a single pit; Kailasha, multi-storied with a single peak; Nandana, multi-storied with no peaks of steeples; Samudra, single-storied and circular; Vrita, single-storied and circular; Vrisha, single-storied and circular; Mrigasimha, single-storied and circular; Padma, single-storied and shaped like a lotus flower; Garuda, shaped like the mythical bird Garuda; Nandi, shaped like a bull; Gaja Kunjara, shaped like the back of an elephant; Guharaja, like a cave; Hamsa, shaped like a swan in flight with an elliptical base; Kumbhahata, with a ground plane shaped like a pot; Svartabhadra, 5-storied with many peaks and square base; Astashra, single-storied and 8-sided. What about icons or image? Icons can be out of gold, silver, copper, stone, wood and astadhatu, an alloy made of bronze, copper and other metals. Icons of different materials are associated with different rewards. Wooden icons grant long life and riches. Clay icons grant pleasures in every wood. Icons fashioned of gels or precious stones grant prosperity. Gold image give man strength. Silver one fame and copper one's children. Opulence and landed property are the rewards obtained from worshipping a stone image. Wood for wooden image should be cooked with great care. Astrology should be consulted about the auspicious time for such a cutting. Ceremonies should be performed. It is only after all this has been done that the individual should go out to gather the wood from the forest. Images should not be made out of defective or inferior quality wood. One should therefore avoid cutting the trees growing in temple, land or cremation grounds, trees which shelter many birds, trees disfigured by stones, fire, lightning and elephants, trees with just one or two branches, trees which have dried up or in which decay has set in, trees that are brittle and trees that exude honey, ghee, oil and blood when cut. Three which provide wood appropriate for making images are a spice of pine, sandalwood, a tree sacred to Shiva, Bilva, Amra, Manga, Neem, jackfruit, and the red sandalwood. An image of Surya should ideally be built as follows. The image should measure 84 fingers. The face should be 12 angles in length, in which 1/3 would be accounted for by the chin. The rest would be the nose and the forehead. The eyes should be 2 angles, half of which would consist of the retina. The pupil must be 1/3 the size of the retina. The face has to be exactly 32 angles. The length of the nose should equal that of the neck. The arms and the forearms, the legs and the thighs should be of equal length. The feet should be 6 angles long and 4 angles broad. The toes and the nails should be comparatively smaller. The shoulders, the chest, the thighs, the eyebrows, the forehead, the nose and the cheeks should be raised and uplifted. The eyes must be large, the lips red and the face like a lotus flower. The icon should be adorned with jewels, earrings, garlands, a crown and avyanga. A lotus and a golden necklace should be held in the hand. Far from extracting the flowers of the gods, defective images evoke their wrath. If any part of the image is larger than it should be, danger threatens the kingdom. If any part of the image is smaller than it should be, the kingdom is ravaged by disease. If it is the belly that is too large, there will be hunger and famine. If the belly is too small, there will be widespread poverty. War is signified by a cracked belly and death by a broken one. If the image is not straight and bends to the right, lifespans are reduced. If the image leans to the left, separation of married couples are indicated. If the eyes of the image slant upwards, the maker of the image goes blind. If the eyes slant downwards, the maker of the image has to go through all sorts of difficulties. One has to be a perfectionist in so far as making images is concerned. To attain one's desires through the favor of the gods, human can observe religious rites, vratas, periodically fast, and donate alms, dana. A vrata is a holy resolve either to give up some activity or to follow some specific ritual regularly or certain days or at certain intervals of time. Before observing a vrata, one should follow certain preliminaries so as to purify oneself. One should rise early, brush one's teeth, offer flowers, fruit, incense and food to the idol, and donate alms to Brahmins. One should observe silence throughout the day on which the vrata is to be followed. Control one's temper and check one's passion. Vratas owe their origin to sage and gods. It is they who instructed mankind to observe these religious rites in order to attain their aims. Subsequently, individuals who benefited from the observance of vratas pass it on this knowledge and wisdom to others. That is what happened in the case of Shyamava. Shyama, in the city of Midhiva, there used to live a woman named Urmila. Urmila had a son and a daughter. Since she found it difficult to make her living in Midhiva, she decided to try her luck elsewhere. Urmila accordingly went to the city of Avanti and began to work in Brahmana's house there. On one particular occasion, Urmila's children were so hungry that she had to steal some grains of wheat from her master's store. Urmila's daughter Shyama grew up to be ravishing beauty and was married to Yama. Yama told Shyama, as my wife, you are free from roam everywhere in my house. However, there is 7 rooms which are taboo. Even for you, they are always kept locked. You must never enter him. Ni must you ever unlock the doors that led into these rooms. In due course, Armia died. Shyama followed Yama's instruction to the letter for some time. She never sought to enter the rooms which were out of bounds, but eventually curiosity got the better of her. She opened one of the doors and peered into the room. When a sight met her eyes, she saw that inside the room Yama's servants were in the process of forcing her mother Urmila into a cauldron of boiling oil. Unable to bear the sight, Shyama closed the door and opened the door to another room. In the second room she found her mother being crushed on a green stone. Shyama closed this door and opened the door to a third room. In this room, nails were being driven into her mother's forehead. In the fourth room, Urmila was being torn to pieces and eaten alive by fierce dogs. Similar sights met Shyama's eyes in the fifth, sixth and seventh rooms. Each room gave her a glimpse of the tortures her mother was being subjected to in various hells. Shyama went up to her husband and told him of her disobedience and of the shock that he had caused her. "Why is my mother being tortured thus?" she asked. "What is her sin?" "You have indeed been disobedient," replied Yama. "I had expressly asked you not to enter these 7 rooms. As for your mother, she is only being meted out of the punishment that she deserves. She had stolen some wheat from the Brahmana who had been her master. The theft of a Brahmana's property is a terrible sin. One who steals from the house of a Brahmana has to suffer in hell till eternity." "I cannot bear to see my mother in hell," said Shyama. "Please tell me how I can help her. Now I can lessen her agonies." "In your previous birth you observed the Buddhashtami Vrata 8 times," replied Yama. "The punya from the observance still vests with you. It has not been exhausted. If you transfer that punya to your mother, she will be rescued from hell." Ashtami is the 8th lunar day. A religious rite observed on Ashtami day is known as Ashtami Vrata. When that day also happens to be Wednesday Budhavara, the rite is referred to as an Buddhashtami Vrata. Shyama followed Yama's advice. Urmila was not only relieved from hell and the torments but she was also assigned a permanent place in heaven in a rejuvenated form. Such as the wonderful effects of observing Buddha Ashtami Vrata. The Brahmana and the Ghost. The river Vetravati flows alongside the city of Vidisha. A Brahmana once came upon a cursed Preta lying on the sandy banks of the Vetravati. It was summer and the sands were hot. The ghost was being roasted by the hot sands. There were boils and all over the ghost's body, and he was crying out in the unbearable thirst. The Brahmana felt moved. "Why are you being tortured thus?" he asked. "I used to be a Vaishyu named Shilabhadra in my early life," replied the Preta. "I lived in the city of Vidisha. I was a rich man and looked after my family well. I took care of all my wealth, but I had a powerful attachment to material possession and did not donate any alms to Brahmins. I did not show them any respect, nor did I worship the gods. I never showed any consideration to those who were not my immediate family members. Since I never did any good to those who were not my relations, I am being punished after my death. I have been left there here to roast on the banks on the Vetravati. I can bear this agony no more. Please help me redeem myself. I observed the Shukradvadashi Vrata 10 years ago, replied the Brahmana. The punya that I derived has not yet been exhausted. I will transfer that punya to you so that you may be relieved. The host acquired the Brahman's remaining punya and ascended straight to heaven. Such is the wonderful effect of observing Shukradvadashi Vrata. The previous Purana mentioned many other vratas as well, also it does not always specify what these individual rites involve. The Abha-Dvadashi Vrata brings more punyas and does a visit to sacred tirthas like Gaya, Pushkara, Varanasi and Prayaga. The observance of a Tiyoka Vrata involves wearing a Tiyoka. Enemies and evil spirits flee when they see the mark of the Tiyoka. A Jatismara Vrata requires the observance of silence till the moon rise. Different gods have to be simultaneously worshipped. A Jatismara is a person who can recollect the incidents of early lives. A person who faithfully observes this particular religious rite is blessed with this gift. One does not always have to observe a vrata for the punya to be acquired. Even if one reads or listens to the vidhi of a vrata, punya can be gleaned. Such is, for example, the case with Rasa Kalyani Vrata, in which the goddess Parvati has to bathe in griha, clarified butter, and worship it. A person who listens to the vidhi of this vrata or pursues others to do the same gets to live in Parvati's abode. All his sins are immediately forgiven. And Arhanandakari Vrata involves the worship of Shiva and Parvati. One who listens to the vidhi for this vrata or makes others to do the same gets to live in Indra's abode. One who reads out or listens to the vidhi of Mandara Shastri Vrata is absolved of all sins. Such is the power of vratas, but a vrata that is incompletely or half-heartedly observed erodes the rules of the god. If such displeasure has indeed been cursed, the rules of the god can be appeased by observing Akhanda Dvadashi Vrata. This requires the worship of Vishnu with offerings and incantation. A large number of vratas are reserved exclusively for women. For example, women can acquire the punya obtained through the Ashwamedha Yajna by observing the Ananta Tritiya Vrata in the winter. In observing such vratas, married women must wear red clothing, widows must wear yellow clothing, and unmarried women must wear white clothing. Women can attain salvation by worshipping Vishnu and feeding Brahmanas in the course of Aranya Dvadashi Vrata. Vrata connected with the sun.